I opened my son's safe out of curiosity, then called the police. The safe door swung open with less resistance than I expected. My hands were steady on the dial, muscle memory from years of opening similar locks at the hardware store where I used to work. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were bundles of cash wrapped in plastic bands. Beneath them, 3 passports with different names and my son's photograph. I lifted one out, felt the weight of the paper, examined the stamps from countries I knew he had never mentioned visiting. Then, I saw the manila envelope at the bottom, unsealed, and I understood that what I was about to do would change everything between us forever. But I pulled it out anyway. I had not seen Daniel in 4 months. He called every few weeks, brief conversations that felt like reports filed by obligation rather than affection. He was busy with work, he said. Consulting took him overseas frequently. His voice carried that clipped efficiency I remembered from his teenage years when he decided emotion was a luxury he could not afford. I never pushed. I learned long ago that my son valued his autonomy above all else, and I had no wish to be the kind of father who demanded access he had not earned. The house felt larger without my wife. She had been gone 3 years, cancer that moved faster than any of us anticipated. Daniel came home for the funeral, stood beside me at the service with his jaw set and his eyes dry, then left the next morning for what he called an urgent meeting in Singapore. I did not begrudge him his grief. People process loss in their own ways. I cleaned the gutters that weekend, repaired the fence gate that had been sticking, and settled into the rhythm of solitary routines. Daniel kept a room in the house. He asked if he could store some belongings here after he sold his condo 2 years ago, said it made more sense financially to rent short-term places near his projects. I agreed without hesitation. The room contained a bed he never used, a desk with nothing on it, and a closet with a few suits still in dry cleaning plastic. The safe sat in the corner, bolted to the floor joists through the carpet. He installed it himself one weekend, worked with a drill and measuring tape, refused my offer to help. I never thought much about it until the break-in. I came home from the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon to find the back door frame splintered. Someone had used a pry bar, left gouges in the wood and paint chips on the welcome mat. I stood in the doorway for a moment, bag still in hand, and scanned the kitchen. Nothing looked disturbed. The television was still mounted on the living room wall. My laptop sat on the dining table where I had left it that morning. I set the groceries down carefully and walked through each room. My bedroom looked untouched. The office where I kept my files and a few pieces of my wife's jewelry was exactly as I remembered. Then I opened Daniel's door. The closet had been, ransacked. Suits lay crumpled on the floor, hangers scattered. The desk drawers hung open, empty except for a few pens and a notepad with nothing written on it. But the safe remained closed, undamaged, its keypad blinking green as always. I stood there for several minutes, trying to understand what someone had been looking for that they did not find. I called the police first, then Daniel. The officer who responded was young and thorough, took photographs of the door, dusted for prints that would likely lead nowhere. He asked if anything was missing. I told him I did not think so. He suggested I have my son inventory his belongings when he returned. I said I would. Daniel did not answer when I called. I left a message, kept my voice level, said there had been a break-in but nothing appeared taken, and asked him to call me back when he could. He texted 2 hours later. Traveling. Will call tomorrow. Is the safe okay? That question sat in my chest all evening. Not, are you okay? Not, should I come home? Just, is the safe okay? I repaired the door frame myself the next morning, drove to the hardware store, bought a reinforced strike plate and longer screws, installed them with care. The work settled my mind. I've always believed that problems are best addressed through concrete action rather than speculation. But Daniel's question kept returning. Why would someone break into my house, ignore everything of obvious value, tear apart a mostly empty closet, and leave a safe untouched? He called that night. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, reading a book I had picked up at the library about the history of clockmaking. The phone vibrated on the table. Dad, I got your message. You're sure nothing was taken? Nothing I could see. They went through your closet pretty thoroughly. There was a pause. I heard voices in the background, the muffled sound of an airport or hotel lobby. Did they touch the safe? No, it's fine. What would they have been looking for, Daniel? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know. Probably just random. I'll be back next week and I'll go through everything. Did you file a police report? Of course. Okay, listen, I have to board. I'll call you when I land. He did not call when he landed. I did not expect him to. I spent the next few days attending to ordinary tasks. I replaced the weather stripping on the front door. I organized the garage, a project I had been avoiding for months. I cooked simple meals and ate them at the kitchen table while reading. But my mind kept returning to the safe, to the specificity of Daniel's concern, to the absence of any other explanation for why someone would break in and leave empty-handed. On the fourth day, I made a decision that I knew crossed a line I had never crossed before. I told myself it was about safety, about understanding what kind of danger might be in my house. But I knew, even as I knelt in front of the safe, that I was lying to myself. I wanted to know who my son had become. The combination was not difficult to determine. Daniel had always been methodical, but not particularly creative. I tried his birthday first, reversed, then my wife's, then the date of our anniversary. The fourth attempt used the date we bought this house, and the lock clicked open. The cash surprised me less than it should have. There was perhaps $50,000, maybe more, bundled in hundreds. But it was the passports that made my hands go cold. I opened each one carefully. British, Canadian, Australian, all with Daniel's face, all with different names: Thomas Wheeler, David Morrison, James Caldwell. The stamps inside showed entries and exits from countries I recognized from news reports, places where consulting work seemed an unlikely explanation. The manila envelope contained photographs. I spread them across the carpet, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Daniel in various locations, sometimes alone, sometimes with other men I did not recognize. Some of the images showed documents, close-ups of papers with official seals and signatures I could not read. Others showed what looked like security footage stills, grainy images of hallways and doorways. At the bottom of the envelope was a flash drive. I've never been particularly skilled with computers, but I understood the basics. I carried the drive to my office, inserted it into my laptop, and waited while the files loaded. There were dozens of folders, each labeled with codes that meant nothing to me. I opened one at random. What I saw made me understand that my son was not a consultant. The files contained records, financial transactions, names and addresses, surveillance logs written in the same clipped, efficient language Daniel used in his phone calls. I read through several documents, my chest tightening with each page until I reached one that made me stop completely. It was a contract. The language was carefully neutral, full of euphemisms and indirect phrasing, but the meaning was clear enough. My son was being paid to gather information on people, to track their movements, to compile dossiers that would be used for purposes the contract did not specify, but that I could easily imagine. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. My son was a spy, or something close to it, maybe corporate espionage, maybe something governmental, maybe something else entirely. The details did not matter as much as the central fact. He had built an entire life I knew nothing about, and he had chosen to hide it from me, not out of necessity, but out of preference. I closed the laptop and returned the flash drive to the envelope, put everything back in the safe exactly as I had found it, spun the dial to lock it again, stood in the doorway of his room, and tried to reconcile the boy I raised with the man I had just discovered. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed and replayed every conversation we had over the past few years, searching for clues I had missed, the vague job descriptions, the overseas travel that never quite aligned with where he said he was going, the careful way he answered questions, always providing just enough information to satisfy without revealing anything substantive. I had attributed it all to his personality, his need for privacy and control. I'd never imagined it was deliberate deception. The next morning, I called a locksmith, told him I needed to change the locks on my doors after a break-in. He came that afternoon, installed new deadbolts on the front and back entrances, gave me keys that Daniel would not have. I did not tell him I was changing the locks to keep my son out. I barely admitted it to myself. Then I began my own methodical inquiry. I started with the names on the passports. I searched each one online, looking for any digital footprint that might explain their purpose. Thomas Wheeler appeared in business registries for several companies in London, all of them with vague mission statements about consulting and strategic services. David Morrison had a LinkedIn profile listing experience in security analysis. James Caldwell existed only as a name on a corporate filing in Sydney, a director of a firm that appeared to have no actual operations. I took notes by hand, filled a yellow legal pad with details and observations. I did not trust my computer anymore, did not know if Daniel had ways of monitoring it remotely. The paranoia felt absurd and entirely justified at the same time. Over the next week, I constructed a timeline. I pulled out old calendars, reviewed credit card statements from the family account Daniel still occasionally used for household expenses. I cross-referenced the passport stamps with the dates he told me he was traveling. Singapore, when the Australian passport showed him in Jakarta. Tokyo, when the British passport placed him in Berlin. The discrepancies were consistent and deliberate. I drove to the public library to use their computers, creating anonymous email accounts to send myself copies of documents I photographed with my phone. I felt ridiculous, an old man playing at investigation. But I also felt a clarity I had not experienced in years. Every small discovery confirmed what I already knew. The cash bothered me more than the passports. I counted it one afternoon, sitting on Daniel's floor with the door locked. $63,000 total. I wondered where it came from, whether it was payment for services or a reserve fund for emergencies. I photographed the serial numbers on several random bills, a detail I remembered from a crime novel. One afternoon, I called the number on a business card I found in the files. It rang 4 times before a woman answered with a crisp British accent. Palliser Strategic Group. Yes, hello, I'm trying to reach Thomas Wheeler. A pause, the sound of typing. I'm sorry, Mr. Wheeler is currently out of the office. May I take a message? When do you expect him? Back? I'm afraid I don't have that information. May I ask who's calling? I hung up. Thomas Wheeler was real enough to have a receptionist, a company with employees, a presence beyond a forged document. Daniel had not simply created false identities. He had built infrastructure around them. I began to notice things about my own house that troubled me, small items out of place, the router in my office that seemed newer than I recalled installing. I checked the model number online and found it was a type often used for remote access. One evening, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a printed message. Leave it alone, for your own safety. I brought it inside and stared at it while my dinner grew cold. Someone was watching. Someone knew I had found the safe, knew I was asking questions. The message could have come from Daniel's associates, or from the people who had broken in, or from someone else entirely. I called my neighbor, an attorney who lived 3 houses down. We had a cordial relationship, helped each other with yard work occasionally. I asked if he had time to talk about a family matter. He came over that evening and I told him an edited version of events. I did not mention specifics, just said my son appeared to be involved in activities that might be illegal, and I was trying to decide what my obligations were. He listened carefully and finally gave me the same essential answer the first lawyer provided. If I knew about criminal activity and did nothing, I could be held responsible. If I reported it, I would be entangled in whatever followed. The question, he said, is whether you can live with inaction, because that's what silence amounts to. After he left, I sat alone in the dark and thought about complicity. I thought about my wife, who used to say that the hardest part of parenting was knowing when to let your children fail and when to intervene. I could not save my son from himself, but I could refuse to be an accessory to whatever he had become. I called Daniel again. He answered this time, sounded harried. Dad, hey, sorry I haven't gotten back to you. Work has been insane. When are you coming home? Probably next week. Is everything okay? I'd like to see you. There are some things we should discuss. About the break-in? Among other things. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear his breathing, the faint hum of air conditioning in whatever room he occupied. What other things? I'd rather talk in person. Dad, if this is about money or the house or something, We can handle it over the phone. I really don't have time to fly back right now unless it's an emergency. It's not about money. Then what? I chose my words carefully, aware that this conversation might be the last chance I had to reach him before everything changed. It's about who you are and what you've been doing. It's about whether you trust me enough to tell me the truth. The silence that followed felt like falling. I could hear him breathing, could almost see him calculating responses and weighing options. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, colder, more distant. Did you open my safe? I did not answer immediately. I thought about lying, about preserving some pretense of normalcy. But I had already crossed the line. There was no point in retreating now. Yes. Jesus Christ, Dad, do you have any idea what you've done? I know what I found. You shouldn't have those files. You shouldn't have seen any of that. Then you shouldn't have stored it in my house. He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a sharp, bitter sound that reminded me of arguments we had when he was 17 and angry at the world for reasons he could never quite articulate. It was supposed to be safe there. It was supposed to be the one place no one would look because no one would ever suspect you. Suspect me of what? Of being involved, of knowing anything. You were my insurance, Dad. The harmless old man with the clean record and the quiet life. No one pays attention to people like you. I felt something break inside my chest. Not dramatically, just a small, quiet fracture that I knew would never fully heal. So you used me. I kept you safe. There's a difference. And the break-in? Competitors, people who think I have something they want. They won't come back now that they know the safe wasn't touched. They'll assume it's empty or that I moved everything. Did you have them break in? Was this some kind of test? He was silent for long enough that I knew the answer. I needed to know if you'd go looking. I needed to know if you could be trusted. I closed my eyes, pressed the phone against my ear, tried to find some remnant of the boy who used to sit at this kitchen table doing homework while his mother cooked dinner and I read the newspaper. But that boy was gone, if he had ever existed at all. I'm calling the police, I said. No, you're not. I have evidence of illegal activity in my house. I have a responsibility. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Those files, those names, they're connected to people who will not respond well to law enforcement getting involved. You turn me in, you put yourself in danger. I'll take that risk. Dad, listen to me. Please, I know you're angry. I know I've disappointed you. But if you make this call, you will regret it. Not because I'll retaliate, but because you'll become a target for people who solve problems permanently. I should have been frightened. Perhaps I was, somewhere beneath the anger and grief. But what I felt most strongly was clarity. My son had become someone I did not recognize, someone who trafficked in secrets and threats and casual manipulation. And he had done it all while using my home, my trust, my love, as cover for activities I could not condone. Come home, I said, face to face. We'll talk about this properly. Then I'll decide what to do. I can't come home. Not now. Maybe not for a while. Then I'm making the call tonight. Dad. I hung up before he could finish, set the phone on the table and stared at it, waiting to see if he would call back. He did not. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I photographed every page and every file on the flash drive. I used my phone's camera, uploaded the images to a cloud storage account I created with a new email address Daniel would not know. I documented the cache, the passports, the photographs. I wrote a detailed account of our conversation, included dates and times and exact quotes as best as I could remember them. Then I called a lawyer. Not our family attorney, but someone I found through a referral from a friend at church. I explained the situation in broad terms, asked about my legal exposure, my obligations, my options. He listened without interrupting, then gave me advice that was both practical and sobering. If you're certain the materials involve illegal activity, you have a duty to report it. But you should also understand that turning in your son will likely result in prosecution, possibly federal charges depending on what's in those files. You'll be a witness. Your home might be seized as evidence. Your life will become very complicated. And if I don't report it, Then you could be charged as an accessory if it's ever discovered that you knew and stayed silent, particularly since the materials are physically located in your home. So there's no way out that doesn't hurt someone. No, there isn't. I thanked him and ended the call. Sat in my office as the afternoon light faded and shadows filled the corners of the room. I thought about my wife, about what she would have said if she were here. She had always been better at reading Daniel, at understanding the distances he put between himself and everyone else. She would have known what to do, but she was not here, and I had to decide alone. The police arrived at 8 o'clock the next morning. I'd called them the night before, asked to speak with a detective about information related to potential criminal activity. The officer who came was older than the one who had responded to the break-in, wore a suit jacket despite the heat, and introduced himself as Detective Marsh. He sat in my living room with a notepad and a careful, professional demeanor that reminded me of my son. I showed him everything: the safe, already open, the cash, the passports, the files. I played him the recording I had made of my conversation with Daniel, told him about the break-in, about my son's work that I now understood was not consulting at all. I answered every question directly and completely. Detective Marsh took notes for nearly 2 hours. He called for additional officers, specialists who photographed and cataloged every item. They were respectful and methodical, treated my home and my possessions with care. When they Batsurai finally left, they took the safe's entire contents with them, along with my laptop and phone for examination. They told me someone would be in touch, that I might need to provide further statements, that I should not discuss the case with anyone. I nodded and closed the door behind them, stood in the sudden silence of my house and felt the weight of what I had done settle into my bones. Daniel tried to call 3 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from angry to pleading to coldly pragmatic. The last one simply said, "I hope you understand what you've started. I hope you can live with it." I deleted them all. That night, someone tried the locks on my doors. I heard the scratching at the back entrance around 2 in the morning, the careful testing of a handle that no longer turned with keys Daniel possessed. I lay in bed and listened, my phone in my hand ready to call for help. The sound stopped after a minute. Footsteps moved away across the deck. In the morning, I found scratches around the new deadbolt, fresh metal showing through the bronze finish. I photographed the damage, called Detective Marsh. He arrived within an hour, examined the marks, arranged for patrol cars to drive past regularly. "These people won't stop just because you filed a report," he said. "They need to know what you know and whether you've shared it. Then they'll figure it out soon enough." He studied me for a moment. "You're remarkably calm about this." "I'm too old to live in fear, and too stubborn to be intimidated." The next morning, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line was empty. The message contained a single sentence. "We can make this go away if you cooperate." I forwarded it to Detective Marsh, then changed my passwords and enabled every security feature I could find. My own son had likely provided my information to people who would threaten me for doing what I believed was right. The investigation expanded faster than anyone anticipated. The files I provided had led to connections across multiple jurisdictions. I spent hours in interviews, walking investigators through the timeline I had constructed, helping them understand patterns I had observed. One of the federal agents, a woman with gray eyes, asked me directly, "Why did you wait to report this?" "I needed to be certain," I said, "and I needed to understand what I was reporting. I'm not a rash person." She nodded, made a note, moved on. The investigation took months. I gave depositions, testified before a grand jury, provided context and background that helped prosecutors build their case. I learned that my son had been working for multiple clients, some corporate, some government, some private individuals whose identities were never fully revealed to me. He had been trading in information, facilitating transactions that skirted legal boundaries and sometimes crossed them outright. He was arrested in Germany, extradited, after a lengthy legal battle, charged with conspiracy, fraud, violations of export control laws, and several other counts I did not fully understand. His attorney reached out to me once, asked if I would testify on his behalf, speak to his character, help the jury see him as something other than the cold professional the prosecution was portraying. I declined. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sat in the gallery and watched my son sit quietly at the defense table, his expression neutral, his body language revealing nothing. He did not look at me, not once in all those days. When the jury returned a guilty verdict on most counts, he simply nodded, as if confirming a calculation he had already made. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge spoke about breach of trust, about the dangers of trading in secrets, about the need for deterrence. Daniel listened without reaction, thanked the court politely when asked if he had anything to say, and was led away by marshals without looking back. I have not visited him. I write occasionally, brief letters about the house and the garden and the mundane rhythms of daily life. He has not responded. I do not expect him to. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did. Friends from church, neighbors who followed the case in the news, the lawyer I hired who calls occasionally to check on me. I tell them the truth. I regret that my son became someone who required me to make that choice. I regret that I did not see it happening, did not intervene earlier, did not find some way to reach him before he traveled so far down a path I could not follow. But I do not regret opening the safe. I do not regret calling the police. There are lines that cannot be uncrossed, trusts that cannot be rebuilt once broken. My son chose to use my home, my trust, my love as tools in a profession that treated people as assets and truth as a commodity. He chose to put me at risk without my knowledge or consent. I chose to protect myself and live according to principles I still believe matter. The house is quieter now. I have turned Daniel's room into a proper office, donated his clothes, removed all traces of the life he pretended to live here. I keep the door open. I work on small projects, read books about history and craftsmanship, maintain the routines that give structure to my days. Some evenings, I sit on the back porch and watch the sun set through the trees. I think about my wife, about the son we raised together, about the many ways love can fail to be enough. I think about the moment I knelt in front of that safe and chose curiosity over trust, or perhaps chose truth over the comfort of ignorance. I sleep well most nights. My conscience is clear, or as clear as it can be when every choice available was wrong in some way. I did what I believed was right. I protected myself and honored the values my wife and I tried to instill in our children, even if our son chose to reject them. That has to be enough. It is all I have left.